All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be diving into something that I think affects all of us, but in a way that's kind of mysterious and hidden. We're talking cryptography. It's everywhere in our digital lives.
Yeah.
But how many of us can really say we understand how it works or why it even matters?
Yeah, it's kind of like that, isn't it? It's this invisible force field protecting our data, our identities, our online transactions. But most of the time, we're just taking it for granted.
Right, right. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and try to demystify some of this, I guess, tech wizardry. I mean, we've been looking at a ton of material, from those general security concepts to some really specific cryptographic solutions and technologies. I'm actually kind of excited to try and break it all down.
Yeah, and that's really the mission for today's deep dive, to explain how these tools and techniques actually protect our digital information and why picking the right method is so crucial. Because at the end of the day, it's about security, control, and building that trust in the digital world, which is kind of fragile these days.
It really is. So, okay, we've got this whole mountain of information about cryptography. Where should we even start?
Well, I think a good place to begin is with the foundation, and that's public key infrastructure. Most people know it as PKI.
PKI. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds important. But to be honest, it's a bit of a black box to me. What exactly is it?
Sure. So think of PKI like, the framework that underpins a lot of the secure communications and digital identity verification that we rely on every day. It's a system that utilizes public and private keys. It's kind of like digital puzzle pieces, right?
Hmm.
And these puzzle pieces are used along with digital certificates and this thing called key escrow to really establish secure communication and verify identities.
Okay, so public and private keys, digital certificates, a lot of jargon already. Can we break those down a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with the keys. So the public key, as the name suggests, is meant to be shared. You can think of it almost like your email address or your phone number. Its main job is to encrypt data. So to scramble it in a way that only the intended recipient who has the matching private key can unscramble it.
Okay, so it's like a special lock that only the right key can open.
Pretty much, yeah. And the public key is also used to verify digital signatures. So it's kind of like checking a digital stamp to see if it's legitimate, right? Making sure it hasn't been tampered with.
Got it. So
Yeah.
public key is for encrypting stuff sent to me and for checking digital signatures. What are this private key then?
So the private key, that's the one you keep, super secret. It's like the key to your personal vault. You never share it with anyone. And it's used to decrypt information that was encrypted with the corresponding public key.
So the private key unlocks the secret messages sent to me using my public key.
Exactly. It's that other half of the puzzle piece. And because only your private key can unlock data encrypted with your public key, it also plays a vital role in creating digital signatures, which are really important for non-repudiation.
Wait, non-repudiation, that sounds like a legal term.
It kind of is. Basically, it means you can't deny sending a particular message or document later on because your unique private key is used to create that signature. It's like ironclad proof you were involved in the process. It's like a digital fingerprint that you can't really fake.
Okay, that makes sense. So public and private keys working together. Got it.
Yeah.
You also mentioned this thing called key escrow. What's that all about?
Right. So key escrow, it's kind of like having a backup plan for your keys. It's basically a trusted third party, someone you really trust, or maybe a really secure system that holds copies of your private keys just in case something happens and you lose access to them.
So if I forget my super secure password or my computer crashes or something, I have a way to get those keys back.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like that break glass in case of emergency situation. And these key escrow systems, they're often implemented using this specialized hardware called hardware security modules, or HSMs. They're basically super secure vaults designed specifically for storing and managing these cryptographic keys.
HSMs, I've heard of those. So they're like the Fort Knox of the digital world.
Yeah, something like that. They're designed to be super tamper resistant and protect those keys from all sorts of threats, both physical and digital.
Okay, so PKI is the foundation, with these keys, digital certificates, and even a backup plan. But how does the actual scrambling of information happen? What about encryption itself?
Right. So encryption is the process of transforming readable information or plain text into unreadable ciphertext. It's like turning your message into a secret code. And this transformation uses mathematical formulas called algorithms and those secret keys we talked about earlier. The basic idea is to make the information unintelligible to anyone who doesn't have the correct key to decrypt it. And one thing to remember is that the more bits in an encryption key, the more complex and secure it is. But it might also take more processing power to actually do that encryption and decryption.
More bits equals more security, but maybe a little more work for the computer.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And just like you have different levels of security for your physical belongings, there are different levels of encryption depending on what you're trying to protect.
Okay, interesting. So what are some of those different levels?
Well, one of the most common ones is full disk encryption, or FDE. As the name suggests, it encrypts everything on your hard drive or SSD, making it unreadable without the right decryption key.
So if I lose my laptop and it is full disk encryption, the data is basically useless to whoever finds it.
Exactly. It's like having a super strong lock on your entire storage device. And often this type of encryption is enhanced by using a trusted platform module, or TPM, which is a dedicated chip on many motherboards that stores the keys in a super secure way. You've also got things like Opal drives, which are self-encrypting drives where the encryption is built right into the hardware. And then there are software options like Veracrypt, which is popular for encrypting partitions or specific sections of your drive using really strong encryption algorithms like AES, Serpent, and Twofish.
Okay, so full disk encryption is like the nuclear option securing everything at once. What about when you just want to encrypt specific files or folders?
Yeah, then you're talking about file encryption. This allows you to encrypt individual files or folders. So even if someone gains access to your computer or storage device, they can't read those specific encrypted items without the correct key. Systems like the Encrypted File System, or EFS, are commonly used for this purpose, often linking the encryption keys to your user account on the computer.
So file encryption is like putting individual locks on specific files instead of locking down the whole room.
Got it. What about volume encryption? How's that different?
Volume encryption is kind of in between full disk and file encryption. It often works with that TPM chip we talked about to provide really strong security during the boot process. A good example is BitLocker in Windows, which uses the TPM to securely store keys and encrypt the entire volume or logical partition. This makes it really hard for someone to tamper with your system or bypass login security. It's like having a security guard check your ID before they even let you into the building.
Okay, layers upon layers of security. What about database encryption? That sounds like it's protecting, huge amounts of information. Absolutely. Database encryption is about protecting those vast stores of data. And then you can get even more granular with record-level encryption, where you encrypt each individual record within the database using its own unique key.
Whoa, that's like putting a separate lock on every file in a filing cabinet.
Exactly. It's the ultimate level of protection for sensitive data. And then we have transport communication encryption, which is about protecting data as it travels across networks, like the internet.
Okay, so that's what keeps my data safe when I'm shopping online or doing my banking, right?
Exactly. TLS and SSL are the main protocols for this. You see it all the time with HTTPS websites. That S at the end means the connection is secure and encrypted. There's a whole process of handshakes, key exchange, and then the actual data is encrypted, transmitted, and then decrypted at the other end. It's like sending your message through a secure tunnel.
Got it. Secure tunnels for our online activities. Love it. Now, you mentioned these two main types of encryption before, asymmetric and symmetric. Can you explain the difference?
Sure. So asymmetric encryption is what we talked about earlier with PKI, using those public and private key pairs. The public key encrypts, and only the matching private key can decrypt. It's super secure, but it can be slower, especially for large amounts of data. RSA, Diffie-Hellman, and elliptic curve cryptography, they're all examples of asymmetric algorithms. Think of asymmetric keys like specialized tools. One tool can only tighten a screw, while a very specific, different tool is needed to loosen it. They work together, but each has a distinct role.
Okay, so asymmetric is super secure, but maybe not the best for encrypting a whole movie I want to stream online.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's where symmetric encryption comes in. It uses a single secret key for both encryption and decryption, making it much faster and more efficient for handling large volumes of data. Think of it like using the same key to lock and unlock a whole treasure chest. Common symmetric algorithms include DES, 3DES, and the one you probably hear about the most, AES.
AES, yeah, that's like the gold standard these days, right?
Pretty much. It was chosen by the U.S. government back in 2001 and is widely used and trusted. And it can handle different key lengths, too, like 128, 192, or 256 bits, which makes it really flexible and secure.
So to recap, asymmetric for that initial secure key exchange and maybe smaller super secret stuff, and symmetric for handling the bulk of the data we're sending back and forth online.
You nailed it. Now, there are a couple of other encryption concepts we should touch on. Key exchange, which is how those keys are securely shared in the first place. Diffie-Hellman is a really clever way to do this, even over insecure channels. Then you have the actual encryption algorithms. Those are the mathematical recipes that do the actual scrambling. And the length of the key, or key length, is super important too. The longer the key, the harder it is to crack. And finally, key longevity is also key. Just like you change your passwords regularly, you should also update encryption keys every so often, like every year or two, to maintain that strong security posture.
Got to keep those digital keys fresh. Now, what about homomorphic encryption? This one sounds kind of sci-fi to me. Doing math on encrypted data without decrypting it first.
It is pretty mind-blowing stuff. Imagine being able to process sensitive data in the cloud without ever actually seeing the raw data itself. Or let's say medical researchers want to analyze data from lots of different hospitals. Homomorphic encryption could allow them to find patterns and insights without actually decrypting any individual patient's data, so their privacy is protected.
So it's like having a magic black box that can work on secret information without ever revealing the secrets.
Yeah, it's a pretty cutting-edge area of research, but it has huge potential for privacy and security.
Amazing. So we've talked about the how of securing data. What about the tools that help us make this all happen?
Right. Well, one of the most important ones is the Trusted Platform Module, or TPM. We mentioned earlier. It's a little chip built into lots of devices, kind of like a tiny hardware vault, that can generate, store, and manage cryptographic keys really securely. It also helps to make sure your system boots up securely and can be used for hardware authentication.
So the TPM is like a tiny security guard living inside my computer.
Yeah, a good way to think about it. And then we have hardware security modules, or HSMs, which are more robust standalone devices that do similar things but on a larger scale. They're often used in high security environments like banks and data centers, where they protect those keys and cryptographic operations really, really carefully.
So TPM is the personal bodyguard and HSM is the whole security detail.
Exactly. And then because managing all these keys can get complicated, we have key management systems. These are software tools that help organizations create, distribute, rotate, and revoke keys in a secure and controlled way. It's like having a master key ring and a system for keeping track of who has access to what.
Makes sense. And finally, what about Secure Enclave?
So the Secure Enclave, that's a hardware-based feature found in a lot of modern processors. It's basically a super protected area within the chip itself, designed to handle those really sensitive operations like storing your biometric data like fingerprints or Face ID and running critical cryptographic functions. It's isolated from everything else, which makes it really hard to attack. Think of it like a vault within a vault.
Wow, a fortress inside a fortress. Okay, so we've got ways to make data unreadable with encryption. We've got ways to manage all these secret keys. But what about making information harder to understand in the first place?
Right, that's where obfuscation comes in. It's the process of deliberately making code, data, or really any kind of information more complex and difficult to understand. It's often used in software development to try and prevent reverse engineering or, someone taking apart your code and figuring out how it works.
So instead of putting a lock on the door, you're making the house a confusing maze.
Yeah, a great way to put it. And there are different techniques for doing this. There's Steganography, which is like hiding a secret message inside a picture or an audio file. It's like that old trick of writing a message in invisible ink, hiding in plain sight.
Sneaky. What about tokenization? I think I've heard that one before in relation to online payments.
Exactly. It's often used to protect sensitive data, like credit card numbers. Instead of transmitting the actual card number, a unique token is used. So even if the token is intercepted, it's useless to an attacker because it can't be used to access your real account. It's like giving someone a temporary pass that only works for a specific purpose.
Makes sense. So instead of giving them the keys to my castle, I'm giving them a one-time ticket to the amusement park.
Exactly. And then you have data masking, which is about obscuring or replacing sensitive data with realistic but fake data. It's often used for things like software testing or sharing data for research while protecting privacy. So you might replace real names and addresses with fake ones, but the overall data structure remains the same, so it's still useful for analysis. It's like using stage makeup to change someone's appearance for a play, right?
Interesting analogy. Okay, so obfuscation makes things harder to understand or find. Encryption makes them totally unreadable. What about hashing? I know it's used for passwords, but I think you said it's used for other stuff too.
Yeah, so hashing is all about creating a unique digital fingerprint for a piece of data. You take the data, it could be a document, a file, a password, anything, and you run it through a special one-way function called a hash function. And what you get out is this short, fixed-length string of characters called a hash value. This hash is unique to that specific data. You can't easily reverse the process to get the original data back.
So it's like taking a whole book and boiling it down to a single unique code that represents that book.
Yeah, kind of like that. And because it's a one-way function, even if someone gets their hands on the hash, they can't easily figure out what the original data was. And this is super useful for two main things: data integrity and password security.
Okay, break those down for me.
Sure. So for data integrity, let's say you download a file online. If the website also provides you with the hash value for that file, you can run the file you downloaded through a hashing algorithm and compare the two hashes. If they match, you know the file hasn't been tampered with or corrupted.
So it's like a checksum that verifies the file is exactly how it should be. Makes sense. What about passwords? How does hashing help there?
Right, so for passwords, instead of storing your actual password, websites and systems will often store the hash of your password. When you try to log in, they hash the password you entered and compare it to the stored hash. If they match, you're in. Because they're not storing the password itself, even if the database is hacked, it's really hard for the attackers to get those actual passwords. It's like locking your valuables in a safe that only the correct key can open, but even if someone steals the safe, they still can't see what's inside.
Okay, so the hash acts as a super secure stand-in for the actual password.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something called salting that makes this even more secure, right?
Exactly. Salting involves adding a unique random piece of data to each password before it's hashed. So even if two people have the exact same password, the resulting hashes will be different because the salt is different. This helps to defeat things like rainbow tables, which are pre-computed tables of common password hashes that attackers try to use. It's like adding a secret ingredient to everyone's password recipe, making each resulting hash completely unique and much harder to crack.
So it introduces randomness to thwart those pre-calculated attack methods.
Clever. Now, what about digital signatures? How are those different from just regular encryption?
So digital signatures are kind of like the electronic equivalent of a handwritten signature, but with, like, superpowers. They provide authenticity, integrity, and non-repudiation. Meaning, you can be sure a document is really from who it claims to be, that it hasn't been tampered with, and the sender can't deny they signed it later on.
Okay, sounds pretty powerful. How do they work?
So the signer uses their private key, remember, the super secret one, to create a unique code, which is the digital signature. This signature is then attached to the document. Then anyone who received the document can use the sender's public key to verify that signature. If it checks out, it means the document is authentic and hasn't been messed with.
It's like a tamper-proof seal of approval with built-in ID verification. Now, what about this thing called key stretching? Right, so key stretching is a technique that's used to transform a password, which is often relatively short and guessable, into a longer, more complex key that's much harder to crack. It's all about slowing down those brute force attacks where attackers try to guess passwords by trying every possible combination.
So it's like putting a time delay lock on a vault to slow down the robbers.
Pretty much. There are different techniques for doing this, like PBKDF2, which involves repeatedly applying a hash function thousands of times. And then there's bfrypt, which was specifically designed for password hashing. Both methods basically make it really computationally expensive and time-consuming for attackers to try and guess passwords, which makes their job a lot harder.
Got it. Make those passwords hard to crack. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. What about blockchain? It's everywhere these days, not just for cryptocurrencies anymore.
Yeah, blockchain has become a really big deal. It's basically a decentralized digital ledger, meaning the data isn't stored in one central location, but is distributed across a whole network of computers. This makes it really secure because it's very difficult for any single entity to tamper with the data. It's like having a shared record book that everyone in a community has a copy of, so no one can change it without everyone knowing.
Right. And each new piece of data is added as a block to the chain. And those blocks are linked together with cryptography, right?
Exactly. And that chain of blocks can be used to record all sorts of transactions and information in a really transparent and secure way. It started with Bitcoin, but now it's being used for tracking financial transactions, medical records, property ownership, supply chain data, all kinds of stuff.
And this whole idea of an open public ledger is central to this, right? Where anyone can see the history of transactions.
Exactly. The open public ledger is like a public record book that's accessible to everyone, but it's so secure and tamper resistant that it provides a really high level of trust and transparency. And all of this is possible because of the underlying cryptographic techniques that secure those blocks and ensure the integrity of the data. It's like having a public notary that everyone trusts because it's mathematically impossible to cheat the system.
Okay, that's really cool. From digital currencies to tracking the provenance of diamonds, the possibilities are pretty mind-blowing. Finally, let's talk about certificates. We touched on them with PKI, but they seem to be everywhere online.
They are really essential in the digital world. They're like digital passports or ID cards that help to establish trust and verify identities online.
Okay, but I see certificates all the time when I'm browsing websites. I don't always know what they're doing. Can you
Right.
explain?
Sure, so certificates are basically digital documents that vouch for the authenticity of a website, an individual, or device. They use cryptography to bind a public key to a particular identity. And the organizations that issue these certificates are called certificate authorities, or CAs. They're kind of like the
Yeah.
trusted gatekeepers of the internet, making sure those digital identities are legitimate.
So the certificate authorities are like the passport office of the internet.
Yeah, a good way to think about it. Now, just like real-world passports, digital certificates have an expiration date, and sometimes they need to be revoked before that date if they're compromised or there's some other issue.
Huh.
And there are mechanisms for dealing with this, like certificate revocation lists, or CRLs, which are lists of revoked certificates that browsers and systems can check against. And then you have the Online Certificate Status Protocol, or OCSP, which is a way to quickly check the status of a certificate in real time by querying the CA's server directly.
So CRLs are like those wanted posters,
Yeah.
and OCSP is like calling the sheriff to check if someone's ID is still valid.
Exactly. And we also have different types of certificates. There are self-signed certificates, which are basically like printing your own ID card at home. They're fine for internal use or testing, but they don't carry the same weight as a certificate issued by a trusted CA. And then you have third-party certificates, which are the ones you want for public-facing websites and online transactions. These are issued by well-known CAs like DigiCert, GlobalSign, GeoTrust, and Thought, and they're trusted globally.
So self-signed is like a homemade badge, and third party is like an official passport.
Yeah.
Got it. What about those wildcard certificates I've heard about?
Ah, yes. Wildcard certificates are really handy because they can be used to secure multiple subdomains of a single domain. So instead of needing separate certificates for, let's say, mail.example.com, shop.example.com, and blog.example.com, you can use one wildcard certificate to cover them all.
It's like a master key that unlocks multiple doors. So efficient. Wow, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. From the basics of PKI and encryption to obfuscation, hashing, digital signatures, blockchain, and those all-important digital certificates.
It really highlights just how much goes into securing our online world and protecting our information.
Absolutely. And it's not just for tech experts anymore. Everyone needs to understand at least the basics of cryptography to navigate the digital world safely and responsibly.
It's becoming a fundamental literacy, just like reading and writing.
So for our final thought today, we want you to consider this. In this ever-evolving world of cyber threats, what area of cryptography do you think will be most critical in the coming years? And what can you do to learn more and stay ahead of the curve? Because at the end of the day, it's about finding that balance between strong security, user-friendliness, and managing the very real risks we face in our digital lives. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.